I've spent 56 years on this earth, but I learned more about the world in 5 minutes at a marble security desk than I did in all the decades that came before. My name is Duncan. Until last Thursday, I believed I was a man with a solid foundation. 28 years of marriage to a woman I adored, a quiet accounting practice, and a home that felt like a sanctuary. My wife, Lauren, is the CEO of Meridian Technologies. She's brilliant, driven, and lately, she's been a ghost, haunted by 14-hour workdays and board meetings that never seem to end. That morning, I saw her rush out without even a sip of coffee, looking frayed at the edges. I thought I'd be the hero. I thought I'd surprise her at the office with her favorite latte and a sandwich I made myself. I didn't realize I was walking into the wreckage of my own life. Before I tell you how a simple brown paper bag shattered my reality, I want to ask you something. Have you ever had a gut feeling you ignored because the truth was just too scary to face? Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. I'd love to see how far this old man's voice travels. And if you believe that the truth, no matter how much it burns, is better than a comfortable lie, hit that subscribe button. You're going to want to hear what happened when I came face to face with the man my wife calls husband. I pulled into the visitor parking, feeling that small, nervous flutter you get when you're doing something sweet. The Meridian building was all glass and intimidation. I walked up to the security desk, a sandwich in one hand and a coffee in the other, and met a guard named William. I gave him a confident smile and told him I was there to see my wife, Lauren Hutchins. I told him I was her husband. William didn't just look confused. He looked at me like I was a lunatic. Then, he did something that made the blood drain from my face. He laughed. Not a mean laugh, but a bewildered one. He told me, "Sir, I see Mrs. Hutchins' husband every day. He just left 10 minutes ago." My heart did a slow, heavy roll in my chest. I turned around just as a tall man in a charcoal suit strode through the lobby. He was younger, sharper, and moved with the kind of authority that made the air around him feel expensive. It was Frank Sterling, the vice president she'd mentioned 1,000 times in professional contexts. William gestured to him and said, "There he is now, Mr. Sterling. She's in her office." Frank looked at me, and for a split second, I saw a flicker of recognition in his eyes. I knew exactly who I was. He knew I was the man sitting at home making dinner for one while he played the role of the CEO's husband in the light of day. In that moment, everything in me wanted to scream. I wanted to grab him by that silk tie and demand to know how long they'd been building this stage play. But 28 years of reading people told me to stop. I realized that if I exploded now, I'd lose the only advantage I had, the element of surprise. So, I did the hardest thing I've ever done. I played along. I forced a smile that felt like cracking stone and said, "Oh, you must be Frank. I'm Gerald, a friend of the family. I was just dropping off some papers." I handed him the lunch I'd made for my wife, the lunch she'd likely share with him, and I walked out of that building a different man than the one who entered. I sat in my car and watched the world keep turning, even though mine had just stopped. My phone buzzed with a text from her. "Running late again tonight. Don't wait up. Love you." Those 3 words felt like a physical assault. When she finally walked through the door at 9:30, looking every bit the exhausted, successful executive, she asked me how my day was. I looked at her, the woman I thought I knew better than my own soul, and I felt a cold, sharp clarity take hold. I've lived 56 years, and I always thought the hardest thing about getting older was the slow fade of your memory. But I was wrong. The hardest part is when your memory stays sharp, and you start looking back at your life through a lens that's been shattered. When Lauren walked through the door that night, I didn't see the woman I'd loved for nearly 3 decades. I saw a master at work. She looked tired, her shoulders slumped just enough to invite my sympathy, her voice carrying that practiced, weary warmth. "Back-to-back meetings all afternoon," she sighed, letting her keys jingle onto the counter. I watched her, my eyes tracing the familiar lines of her face, searching for a twitch, a flicker, anything that would betray the fact that she'd spent her day as another man's wife. There was nothing. Her skin was as calm as a frozen pond. I decided to poke the surface just to see if the ice would crack. "I brought you coffee today," I said, my voice as casual as I could manage. "Dropped it off at your office." For the briefest pulse of a second, the time it takes for a heart to skip, something shifted in her eyes. It was a flash of cold calculation, gone before I could even be sure I'd seen it. Then she smiled. "You did?" "I didn't get any coffee." I told her I'd handed it to Frank to pass along. Another silence stretched out, thin and brittle. "Oh," she said, turning to the fridge. "Frank mentioned someone stopped by. I was in meetings. I probably missed it." "That was sweet of you, Duncan." I watched her pour a glass of wine. Her hands were as steady as a surgeon's. Either she was telling the truth and the security guard was a lunatic, or I was married to the most accomplished liar in the state. The rest of the evening was a surreal pantomime. We watched the news. We talked about the weather. We climbed into the same bed we'd shared for 28 years, but as she slept beside me, her breathing deep and untroubled, I stared at the ceiling and did what I do best. I started counting. 3 years since Frank joined her company. 3 years of late nights. 3 years of business trips. How many times had she mentioned his name in passing, conditioning me to accept him, while he was actually inhabiting the very center of her life? The next morning, the betrayal felt even heavier. She kissed my cheek, the same quick, affectionate peck she'd given me for years, and she left for work smelling of the perfume I'd bought her for Christmas. I couldn't go into my accounting practice. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at her empty coffee mug, wondering if she was thinking of Frank while she drank from it. By noon, I was doing something I never thought I'd do. I was hunting through my own home like a detective. I started with her office. I found a receipt from Chez Laurent, the French place where we always celebrate our anniversary. It was dated 6 weeks ago. 2 people, no client appetizers, no business dessert. Just 2 entrees and a bottle of wine at 8:15 p.m. I remembered that night. She'd called me at 9:30, sounding relaxed and happy, telling me all about a female client from Portland. She'd lied to my face with the ease of breathing. My phone rang then, and it was her. "Just checking in, honey," she said, her voice filled with the same genuine concern that made me fall in love with her 29 years ago. I felt sick. I asked her about that Portland client, and I heard the hesitation, the tiny, microscopic pause where she adjusted her story. "Oh, that didn't pan out," she said. "She went with a local firm. Why do you ask?" "Just curious," I replied, my heart hammering against my ribs. After we hung up, I went to her laptop. She'd left it open, a sign of how comfortable she'd become in her deception. I saw a notification in the corner, a calendar invite from Frank Sterling. Dinner. Tonight. 7 p.m. at Bella Court, the Italian restaurant where I'd proposed to her. The reservation was under Frank's name. I scrolled through the rest of her calendar and my stomach turned. Coffee with F every Tuesday. Dinner every other Thursday. A weekend planning session this coming Saturday when she told me she had to work. I wasn't her partner. I was a side note, a lingering obligation she scheduled her real life around. The garage door rumbled open at 6:15. She was home early, unusual for a Thursday, but then I remembered the calendar. She walked in looking beautiful, her makeup refreshed, wearing the black dress I'd bought her for her last birthday, the one she said was too fancy for everyday use. "I managed to wrap up early," she said, her perfume trailing behind her like a ghost. "I thought maybe we could grab dinner out tonight. It's been forever since we did anything spontaneous." She stood there smiling, waiting for me to agree to a dinner that I knew was just a cover for her meeting with Frank. I've spent my life as an accountant, a man who believes in the absolute truth of a balance sheet. Numbers don't lie, they don't have hidden agendas or secret lives. But people? People are a different story. When Lauren looked at me that evening, the lie she told was so smooth, so perfectly polished, that I almost felt my resolve crumbling. She suggested a spontaneous dinner, and for a heartbeat, I wanted to believe her. I wanted to be the husband who rushed upstairs to change, grateful for a scrap of attention from his busy, successful wife. I watched her thumbs fly across her phone screen, wondering if she was texting Frank to cancel, or if she was rescheduling their life around me like I was a piece of furniture that needed moving. Then came the pivot. She looked up with this practiced expression of disappointment, sighing as if the weight of the world was on her shoulders. "I just remembered," she said, her voice dripping with fake regret. "I have that conference call with the Tokyo office. It totally slipped my mind. Rain check. It was a masterclass in deception." She told me the call would run until 9:00, kissed my cheek, and went upstairs to prepare. I sat there in the silence of our kitchen, listening to her move about our bedroom. I knew she wasn't preparing for a call. She was preparing for him. When she came back down, she wasn't in pajamas or a headset. She was in a navy blouse and dark slacks, her hair touched up, her perfume fresh. She looked like a woman going to meet the love of her life. Before I tell you what I found in that parking lot, I need to ask you, have you ever been the stable one, the one who stayed home while the person you trusted most was out living a double life? Let me know in the comments. And if you think a 28-year marriage deserves more than a rain check and a lie, hit that subscribe button. You're going to want to hear what happened when I followed her. After she left, the house didn't feel like a home anymore. It felt like a haunted stage set. Every wedding photo on the mantle and every souvenir from our vacations seemed to mock me. I made a sandwich I couldn't eat and sat in the dark, my mind circling the same drain. How long? How did I miss it? At 8:30, I couldn't take it anymore. I drove to Bellecourt. I told myself I was just going to the store, but my hands steered me right to that Italian restaurant. And there it was, her silver BMW parked right next to a dark Mercedes. The last thread of hope I was hanging onto snapped like dry kindling. They were in there, at our table, sharing our wine, laughing at jokes I wasn't meant to hear. I drove home in a daze, the weight of my reality settling over me like a lead shroud. My wife wasn't just having a fling, she was living a second parallel life. I was the side character in her story, the obligation she checked off before going to her real life. But the true revelation, the one that really broke me, didn't come at a restaurant. It came 3 days later while I was cleaning out a junk drawer in the kitchen. My fingers closed around a brass key. It was worn, smooth at the edges and attached to a keychain that said Harbor View Apartments. We've owned our home outright for 8 years. We had no reason to have a key to an apartment complex across town. My heart started to race. I knew that key didn't belong to a client or a friend. I drove to Harbor View that afternoon, sitting in the visitor lot like a ghost in my own life. And then I saw it. Frank's Mercedes pulled into a numbered spot. He got out carrying groceries and dry cleaning, the movements of a man coming home, not a visitor. He disappeared into Building C. I waited 10 minutes, the brass key biting into my palm. My legs felt like lead as I walked up the stairs. I stood in front of apartment 214, my breath hitching in my chest. I slid the key into the lock. It turned with a sickeningly smooth click. I've spent 28 years balancing books, and if there's one thing I know, it's that a ledger doesn't lie, but a person can turn their whole life into a forged document. When I turned that key in the lock of apartment 214, the door didn't just open into a room. It opened into a life I was never supposed to know existed. This wasn't some cheap motel room for a quick tryst. This was a home. It was lived in, warm, and decorated with the very things Lauren loved. But the photos on the mantle, they were the things that truly ended me. Lauren and Frank, tanned and laughing on a beach I'd never seen. Lauren at a Christmas party, Frank's arm around her waist with a possessive, intimate grip. And her left hand, it was bare. No wedding ring, not even a mark where it used to be. I moved through that place like a ghost haunting his own replacement. I walked into the bedroom and saw her clothes hanging next to his. I saw her expensive face cream on the dresser, the same stuff she told me 6 months ago was too pricey to buy again. But on the kitchen counter, I found the real poison. A folder labeled "Future Plans" in her neat, familiar handwriting. Inside were house listings in Frank's name and divorce strategies from the very law firm we used to update our wills. She wasn't just leaving me, she was systematically destroying me. The plan was to paint me as emotionally unavailable. My love for a quiet life was being reframed as social isolation. My contentment with my accounting practice was a lack of ambition. She'd been building this case for 2 years, documenting every time I gave her space as evidence that I'd abandoned her. Before I tell you what I did with the photos I took of that folder, I have to ask, have you ever realized that your kindness was being used as a weapon against you? Drop a comment and tell me your story. And if you think a woman who plots your financial ruin while kissing you goodnight deserves a wake-up call, hit that subscribe button. You're going to want to see how an accountant handles a fraudulent life. While I was standing in their kitchen, my phone buzzed. It was a text from her. "Running late tonight. Don't wait up. Love you." I looked at the phone, then at the room around me. She was probably standing right where I was when she sent those words. I didn't cry. A strange, cold calm settled over me. I'm an accountant. I know how to document a loss. I photographed every page of that legal strategy, every photo of them together, every shared toothbrush. I went home and opened her laptop, and it was all there in her emails too. She'd been telling her sister Sarah that I was having a midlife crisis and that she couldn't sacrifice her happiness indefinitely. She was rewriting our history so she could walk away as the victim and take half of everything I'd worked for. When she finally came home at 11:00 p.m., she played the part perfectly. She kissed my cheek and told me about a productive client dinner with Frank. I looked at her and realized the woman I'd married 28 years ago was gone. In her place was a stranger wearing her skin, a woman who could look me in the eye and lie while she planned my execution. I lay in bed that night listening to her breathe, and I realized I wasn't just losing a wife. I was realizing I never truly had the one I thought I did. I waited until Saturday morning. The sun was shining into our kitchen, and Lauren was in that pale yellow robe I bought her, sipping coffee and scrolling through her phone. It looked so domestic, so real. I walked over and set the folder of evidence right on the table. "We need to talk," I said. I watched her eyes move from the phone to the documents. For a split second, I saw a flicker of something. Maybe it was relief that the acting was over. "I went to your apartment at Harborview yesterday," I said, sitting down across from her. "I used the key from the junk drawer." Lauren didn't gasp. She didn't cry. She set her mug down with a slow, deliberate precision, and then the mask just fell away. The warmth, the tired CEO, the loving partner, it all vanished. In her place sat a woman with eyes as cold as a winter morning. She looked at me, and for the first time in 28 years, I saw who she really was. "I see," she said. No apology, no shame, just the cold calculation of a woman who had already moved on. But what she didn't know was that I hadn't just found her apartment. I'd found her lawyer's notes, and I was about to show her that an accountant knows exactly how to settle a debt. I've spent my life as an accountant, so I know that when the numbers don't add up, there's always a hidden debt. But as I sat across from Lauren that Saturday morning, I realized I wasn't just looking at a bad balance sheet. I was looking at a total liquidation of my life. Her voice was calm, terrifyingly calm. She didn't deny the apartment at Harborview. She didn't cry or beg for forgiveness. She just looked at me with those cold corporate eyes and asked, "How much do you know?" It wasn't an apology. It was a practical inquiry, like she was assessing the damage of a failed merger. Before I tell you the cold, hard words she used to justify replacing me, I have to ask, have you ever been told that your loyalty and contentment were actually your greatest flaws? Let me know in the comments if you've ever dealt with someone who tried to turn your goodness into a weapon. And if you think 28 years of marriage deserves more than a business assessment, hit that subscribe button. You're going to want to hear how she planned to erase me by Christmas. I told her I knew everything. The 2 years of lies, the legal strategy to paint me as a failure, and the man she called her husband at the office. She just nodded, her fingers drumming a rhythm on the table. When I told her the security guard William was the one who let it slip, she actually looked amused. "Poor William," she said, taking a casual sip of her coffee. "He's always been a bit too chatty. I suppose this complicates things." Complicates things. I felt the heat rising in my chest. We were married for nearly 3 decades, and to her, my entire world being shattered was just a complication. She looked at me with a sigh of mild irritation and said, "Gerald, let's not be dramatic. We both know this marriage has been over for years." I stared at her, my heart breaking all over again. I didn't know that. I thought we were happy. But her laugh was short and sharp, like a slap to the face. She told me that while I was content with my little practice and my quiet evenings, she had outgrown me. She called me passive. She said I was a burden she had been carrying, someone who just coasted along while she did the real work of building a life. She told me about Frank. She described him as ambitious and dynamic, everything she claimed I wasn't. 2 years ago, they realized they wanted to build an empire together. And while they were planning that empire, she was coming home to me, eating the dinners I made, and letting me love her, all while she was protecting me from a reality she decided I wasn't ready for. She wasn't lying, she said. She was just managing me. It was the most masterful piece of gaslighting I'd ever experienced. The most chilling part? They wanted to be married by Christmas. She had it all timed out. She told me I'd be fine because I had my simple pleasures, as if I were a child who could be satisfied with a toy while she took the house and the future. She even had the nerve to say she was sorry it happened this way. But she never looked me in the eye when she said it. She didn't see a husband. She saw an outdated model that needed to be replaced. As I walked away, I heard her pick up the phone. Her voice was suddenly light, animated, and full of a warmth I hadn't felt in years. She was calling Frank. She was telling him the inconvenient husband finally knew. "I'm Duncan, and I've learned that 28 years can be erased in a single Saturday morning. But she's wrong about one thing. I'm not just going to be fine. I'm going to make sure that when the audit of this marriage is finished, she pays every cent she owes. I've spent 56 years believing that if you're honest and you work hard, the world will treat you fair." But Monday morning, sitting in a high-back leather chair in David Morrison's office, I realized that being a good man had just made me an easy target. David was the same lawyer who'd handled our wills 5 years ago. I watched him flip through the photos I'd taken at the apartment, the shared toothbrushes, the future plans folder, and that clinical, cold-blooded legal strategy Lauren had drawn up to bury me. David looked up, and for the first time in 30 years of practice, he looked genuinely stunned. "Gerald," he said, "this is one of the most calculated, cold-blooded divorce strategies I've ever seen. She wasn't just leaving you, she was trying to delete you." My heart felt like a lead weight in my chest, but I didn't let my hands shake. I asked him what our move was. David leaned forward, a grim smile touching his lips. He told me that her entire plan relied on me being the quiet, unsuspecting husband who would just roll over. She thought I was a sheep, but she forgot that an accountant knows exactly how to find the bodies buried in the ledger. Before I tell you how I turned my wife's own greed against her, I have to ask, have you ever had to fight for your life against the person you once promised to protect? Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I'm reading every single one, and your support is what's keeping me going. And if you want to see what happens when the quiet husband finally stops being quiet, hit that subscribe button. You're going to want to see the spreadsheets I laid out on David's desk. See, Lauren thought I was coasting at my little practice. What she didn't realize was that I'd been subsidizing her CEO lifestyle for years. I laid out the spreadsheets for David. Lauren makes $200,000, but her expenses were running $60,000 over that every year. I'd been pouring $80,000 of my own earnings into our joint account, thinking I was helping us save for our golden years. Instead, she was using my hard-earned money to pay the rent on her secret love nest with Frank. She was buying Frank's gifts and funding their weekend getaways with the money I'd made from tax returns and audits. David called it what it was: fraud. She's been using marital assets to fund an affair while plotting your ruin, he said. A judge is going to have a field day with this. But I wasn't done. I'd spent the weekend digging into Meridian Technologies' public filings. Lauren had been so arrogant, she thought I wouldn't understand her world. But a balance sheet is a balance sheet, whether it's for a mom-and-pop shop or a tech giant. I showed David the evidence. Lauren had been moving company power over to Frank without board approval. She was grooming her lover to take her spot as CEO while she moved to president, essentially hijacking a multi-million-dollar company to serve her personal life. She was violating her fiduciary duty to her stockholders every single day. She hadn't just betrayed our marriage, she was betraying her career and every person who worked for her. David's eyes sharpened. He told me this wasn't just a divorce anymore. This was a professional execution. He didn't hesitate. "We file first," he said. "We hit her with the facts before she can spin her lies, and we make sure the board at Meridian Technologies knows exactly who's been running their company into the ground." I didn't feel happy. I felt a profound, hollow sadness for the woman I thought I knew. But as I walked out of that office, I knew one thing for sure. The emotional abandonment narrative she'd written for me was dead on arrival. I was Duncan, and I was about to perform the most thorough audit of Lauren Hutchkin's life she'd ever imagined. I've spent my entire life as the man who smooths things over. For 28 years, I was the one who made sure Lauren's path was clear, the one who handled the house, the taxes, and the quiet sacrifices so she could climb that corporate ladder. But that Tuesday afternoon, I did something that went against every bone in my body. I stopped protecting her. I realized that by staying silent, I wasn't being a good husband. I was being an accomplice to my own destruction. I picked up the phone and called Richard Hayes, the chairman of the board at Meridian Technologies. I didn't call to gossip or to cry. I called as an accountant who had found a massive hole in the company's integrity. Before I tell you about the storm that hit Lauren when she walked through the door that night, I want to ask, have you ever reached a point where you realized that taking the high road was just another way of letting people walk all over you? Tell me in the comments. And if you're ready to see what happens when a passive man finally stands his ground, hit that subscribe button. You're going to want to hear this confrontation. I spent 20 minutes on the phone with Richard, sticking strictly to the facts. I told him about the unauthorized restructuring, the way power had been shifted to Frank without board approval, and the lack of transparency in Lauren's recent filings. Richard's voice went from warm to ice cold in seconds. "Jesus, Duncan," he said, "are you saying she's been running a shadow reorganization?" I told him the documents didn't lie. I hung up feeling a strange mix of hollow sadness and sharp, crystalline peace. For the first time, I wasn't the safety net. I was the floor. When Lauren came home that evening, the composed CEO was gone. Her face was a mask of fury and stress. She slammed her briefcase onto the counter and looked at me with eyes that could have pierced armor. "We need to talk," she hissed, "about the call Richard Hayes made to me today. About the governance review the board has suddenly launched. My own husband is trying to destroy my career." I didn't flinch. I looked her right in the eye and told her I'd simply shared factual information about unauthorized corporate changes. She called me a traitor. She said this was different than her personal life because it affected her reputation. I reminded her that her affair with Frank was her professional life now, that she'd built her new company structure around her lover. I told her, I spent 2 years being the man who didn't know. Now, I'm the man who knows everything. I'm not going to quietly disappear just because it's convenient for your future plans. For the first time in our marriage, I saw her reassess me. She realized that the predictable husband she thought she could manage was gone. She asked what it would take to make this go away. I told her the truth. It's not going away, Lauren. You set this in motion. I'm just refusing to help you cover it up anymore. That night, listening to her pacing behind closed doors, making frantic calls to Frank and her lawyers, I realized I'd finally stopped enabling her. The next morning, I filed for divorce. But more than that, I filed for my own dignity. After 56 years of believing love meant endless accommodation, I finally learned that love, real love, requires truth. It's been 6 months now. I'm standing in the kitchen of my new place, making coffee for one, and the silence is the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. The divorce was finalized 3 weeks ago. When her lawyers saw the evidence of her financial fraud and the board's investigation into her professional misconduct, they folded. I kept the house, the one I'd actually been paying for while she was spending our savings on Frank. She kept her retirement, minus every cent she'd stolen from our joint account to fund her double life. It was fair. It was final. But the real peace didn't come from the money. It came from the realization that I am no longer a side character in someone else's play. I'm Duncan. I'm 56 years old. I'm a damn good accountant. And I finally balanced the only ledger that ever truly mattered, my own. I've spent 56 years on this earth, but I didn't truly start living until I lost everything I thought I couldn't live without. The audit of my life is finally complete, and for the first time, the numbers actually make sense. My name is Duncan, and this is how the story ends. The fallout at Meridian Technologies was a slow-motion wrecking ball. The board didn't find anything they could throw her in jail for, but they found enough to strip Lauren of her dignity. Frank was fired on the spot. Turned out his brilliant vice presidency was contingent on not sleeping with the boss. He slunk back to Denver to take a low-level job at a firm that didn't know his name. Lauren kept her job, but only as a ghost of her former self. She was put on probation, forced to report to a supervisor who watched every email and every expense. The woman who wanted to build an empire ended up in a tiny one-bedroom apartment, working under the thumb of the very corporate structure she tried to hijack. I learned all of this through the grapevine, through friends who called to apologize for believing her lies. They told me she'd made it sound like our marriage just faded away. Nobody knew about the secret apartment or the 2 years of betrayal. Hearing that was like a weight lifting off my chest. For months, I'd wondered if I really was the emotionally unavailable failure she'd painted me as. But seeing that she'd fooled everyone, not just me, made me realize the deception wasn't about my lack of love. It was about her lack of character. Before I tell you about the phone call that changed everything, I want to ask, have you ever realized that the person who made you feel small was actually just trying to hide how much they needed you? Drop a final comment and let me know your thoughts on Lauren's fate. And if you believe that a quiet life lived with honesty is better than a loud life built on lies, hit that subscribe button. You're going to want to hear the final words I said to her. Life after the divorce was a revelation. I moved into a smaller place, but it felt massive. I could read in the evening without feeling like my contentment was a disappointment. I could cook what I wanted. I wasn't spending every waking hour trying to anticipate the needs of a woman who was already planning to replace me. And then I met Margaret. She's a widow from my church, a gentle soul who thinks my love for simple things isn't a lack of ambition, but a gift. With her, love isn't a conditional contract. It's just love. Late one spring evening, as I sat on my balcony watching the sunset, my phone rang. It was Lauren. I almost didn't pick up, but curiosity is a persistent thing. Her voice sounded thin, tired, and old. She told me she wanted to apologize. She said she'd had a lot of time to think. She admitted that she'd decided I wasn't enough instead of trying to work with me. She told me that she and Frank had lasted exactly 6 weeks in Denver. Turns out, their great love was just the adrenaline of a secret. Once they had to actually live together, they had nothing. I felt a strange pang of pity for her. I told her I was sorry she threw away 28 years for something that wasn't real. She asked me if I ever thought about what would have happened if she'd just been honest from the start. Sometimes, I said. But the problem wasn't your restlessness, Lauren. The problem was that you chose to replace me instead of talking to me. And even now, this apology is about you, about how your plan failed, not about the damage you did to me. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. She finally wished me happiness and hoped I'd found someone who appreciated what she was too selfish to value. I told her I had. I told her about Margaret. When I hung up, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I was grateful. Her betrayal had been the crowbar that pried me out of a relationship that was slowly killing my spirit. I'd been living in fear of disappointing a woman who had already moved on. Now, I'm 56, I'm alone, but not lonely, and I finally know my own worth. I turned off the lights in my small, honest apartment and realized that for the first time in my life, the ledger is perfectly balanced. I'm Duncan, and I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. If this story reminded you that it's never too late to start over, then telling it was worth it. I'll see you in the next one.